This is one of the Japanese paper balloons, identified by the code name Paper. The unit carries up to 4 10-pound incendiaries and a central payload of about 60 pounds of incendiaries or anti-personnel HE bombs to drop on the west coast of the United States and Canada. It is then supposed to destroy itself.
It is the Japanese equivalent of the V-1 flying bomb, a weapon that strikes fear throughout the American West Coast. Its intent is to kill as many people as possible. With the United States mainland out of reach, Japan's only hope in late 1944 of striking back comes in the form of a balloon. This balloon, though, is anything but playful. It is equipped with a 15-kilogram anti-personnel bomb with 2 incendiary devices attached to it. If it makes it from Japan to America, it is deadly. If it explodes, it kills anybody nearby. The potential of this psychological weapon is enormous. The myth that the United States cannot be touched would be shattered instantly. Chaos would ensue. Resources would be diverted. It is a last-ditch effort by a desperate Japan. Small town or big city, you are a target. This hot-aired kamikaze is coming. Relive the story of the Japanese Fugo weapon, a terror device that is a hidden chapter in Second World War history. Experience the balloon bomb.
The bomber line had advanced to Tokyo at last. And what a bomber line. 400 plane raids. 500. 600. 1,000. The island hopping, the naval battles, the hand-to-hand fighting of the Marines and infantry were all paying off at once. Japanese aircraft production was reduced 50% within a space of weeks. Japanese shipping was slashed to shreds, and their war plants were systematically eliminated.
By late 1944, Japan is a nation on the brink of defeat. Muscled out of the Pacific by American forces, the empire begins crumbling. B-29 raids turn Japanese cities into ashes. The land of the rising sun is now in a desperate state. Time is running out. Something must be done to the enemy. Under these circumstances, it is decided that America is to be attacked. It is not to be done by battleships or Mitsubishi Zeros. Instead, their secret weapon is faceless. Made out of both paper and rubberized silk, it is a hydrogen-filled balloon 33 feet in diameter and 70 feet in height. Its payload consists of 36 sandbags and a 33-pound bomb. Using the jet stream, Japanese scientists believe they have the solution to the geographical barriers standing in the way of the project. Once they are set loose, the balloons travel at an altitude of over 30,000 feet, anywhere from 80 to 120 miles per hour. As gas leaks, causing dissension, sandbags are released, hopefully causing its altitude to rise again. If this concept proves successful and they are able to make it, the outcome turns deadly. The target is the United States West Coast, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California. If these bombs carry through with their objectives, forest fires could erupt, civilians could be killed. A state of panic would exist throughout America. It is a bold idea. It is also a gigantic risk. For this plan to work, the balloons would have to cross the entire Pacific. The odds of them making it to another continent are slim at best. They are more likely to end up at the bottom of the ocean floor than in America's backyard. For Japan, it is a risk they are willing to take. Assessing its impact, they estimate only 10% make it across the ocean. Under normal circumstances, this ratio would be cause for cancellation. However, with Japanese leaders wanting revenge, they are prepared to do anything. With cities decimated, they are eager to get them flying as soon as possible. They want their own version of the Doolittle raid. Beginning in November of 1944, the first wave of balloon bombs are unleashed. Launched from Japan's east coast for nearly 6 months, an estimated 9,000 are released. Unfortunately for the Japanese, only 500 make it to the United States. Those that do reach America cause little controversy. There are sightings from Michigan to Montana, from Seattle to Spokane, from Portland to Port Blaine. At first, the story is covered up by the United States government. If information about these weapons becomes public knowledge, the psychological effect could be enormous on civilian morale. Little is known about the weapon's contents, and the possibility that it contains poison gas is not ruled out. Furthermore, if information makes it back to Japan, it is undoubtedly going to be used as a propaganda weapon to boost the spirits of its people. For that reason, the story is blacked out by the press for the next 6 months. Only when tragedy strikes do Americans become aware of the balloon bomb. May 5th, 1945. Bly, Oregon. The wife of a local minister and 5 children are enjoying a picnic in the woods. Discovering a giant balloon, they are curious and inspect its contents. The results are devastating. As the bomb explodes, all 6 are killed instantly. It is the only time fatal casualties occur on the United States' mainland due to an enemy attack during the entire Second World War. Because of this tragedy, the government allows information to come out regarding the deadly consequences of this new weapon.
Its makeup may change. It may be larger and more destructive than at present. It can be detected by radar or reported by ship and aircraft lookouts. Defensive measures by all services are in operation to meet this menace.
In response to the threat, numerous aircraft are used to shoot down balloons. Using radar assistance, P-38 Lightnings, Vought F-4U Corsairs, and Grumman F-6F Hellcats begin shooting down this menace in the skies. On the other side of the world, the continued bombings of Japanese cities eliminates the factories producing these weapons. In August of 1945, with Japan on the verge of obliteration, the first of 2 atomic bombs is dropped. Days later, the nation that once seemed unstoppable surrenders unconditionally. With American victory comes the end of the balloon bomb menace. For nearly 9 months, from Saskatchewan to Sacramento, 285 incidents of balloon bomb sightings are recorded in the United States, Canada, and even Mexico. Only until years after the war's end does the general public become aware of these devices. With the continent's rugged terrain, to this day, many speculate that more of these weapons are still hidden in the forests and mountains of North America. A weapon filled with potential, in the end, the balloon bomb proves to be a military failure. The geographical limitations and a code of silence amongst the American people causes its impact to be minimal at best. Other than those 6 deaths, for which a memorial exists honoring the fallen, balloon bombs only caused 2 small brush fires during its entire time in operation. It is a weapon that proved ineffective in attempting to destroy the American will.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
July 1945. The first nuclear weapon is detonated at Los Alamos, marking the start of the atomic age. A month later, the deadly atomic force was unleashed upon the populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. Though the devastation was centered at these 2 unfortunate cities, the nuclear fallout would insidiously spread around the globe. November 1945. As part of Operation Deadlight, 116 German U-boats are surrendered to the Royal Navy. Once a terror of the oceans, these ships are sent to watery graves at the bottom of the Atlantic. A half a century later, the metal of these forgotten submarines became a prize, made valuable by decades of atomic testing. While World War II raged in Europe, around the globe, tucked away in the serene countryside of New Mexico, was a secret test facility that held the key to victory. Here in Los Alamos, the brightest physicists and scientists gathered for one purpose: to build the first nuclear bomb. General Groves, director of the Manhattan Project, selected J. Robert Oppenheimer, theoretical physicist, to head up research. With his guidance, the first nuclear weapons began to take shape. By the spring of 1945, Oppenheimer and his team were at the brink of success. They had been in a race with the Nazis to create the ultimate weapon, but by mid-45, Germany had dropped out of the competition. Hitler was dead, and so was his Third Reich. They had beat the Nazis to the bomb, but the war was still not over in the Pacific against the resilient Japanese. The bomb might bring a swift end to hostilities. On July 16, 1945, Trinity, the first atomic bomb, was detonated. Its blast was the equivalent of 20 kilotons of TNT, a level of destruction that the world had never seen. America had blown open the door to the atomic age. It also had the ultimate weapon in its arsenal. A month later, the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were disintegrated by the awesome power of the atom. World War II came to an abrupt conclusion, and for a brief moment, there was celebration and peace. But the atomic genie was out of the bottle. America could not hold its monopoly on atomic power forever. Soon the Soviets would have the bomb, then Britain, France, China. With each passing year, the bombs grew more powerful. Though no nation dared to trigger an all-out atomic war by launching their weapons, each one flexed its atomic muscle with bigger and bigger test blasts. The atomic arsenals ballooned in size, and the atomic clock drew closer to midnight. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the only populations to feel the full force of an atomic blast. But slowly and insidiously, atomic tests were poisoning the world's atmosphere. By the early 60s, world background radiation had increased to 7%, the direct result of above-ground nuclear tests. As an unexpected byproduct of these experiments, producing certain sensitive medical and scientific equipment also became a challenge. In the nuclear age, studying the effects of radiation exposure was a priority. Whole body counting, or the measuring of radiation levels in the human body, required a low background counting chamber, or a room shielded with uncontaminated metal. But such metal was scarce. Iron is converted into steel by pumping air into a blast furnace. However, after the first atomic test, the world's air became contaminated with radioactive particles. Any newly produced metal was irradiated and would throw off sensitive instruments. There was, however, an untapped source of uncontaminated metal or background steel. It was pure, cheap, and in abundance, and it was compliments of the Führer himself. In World War II, German U-boats were the terror of the Atlantic. Working together in wolf packs, they hunted down Allied ships from the depths of the ocean. But with the fall of Germany, the U-boat became an unwanted relic of the Reich. In November of 1945, as part of Operation Deadlight, the remaining 116 German U-boats were surrendered to the Royal Navy. The U-boats were scuttled through gunfire and explosions and sent to the bottom of the Atlantic in an area 100 miles northwest of Ireland. For 50 years, the submarine sat undisturbed, but in the mid-90s, it was suggested that U-boats could be a valuable commodity. Their metal, hulls forged before Trinity and the other atomic tests, were uncontaminated, and there were over 100 of them at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. However, the plan to raise the U-boats was torpedoed by the Russians and Americans. As well, by the 90s, nuclear test bans had decreased radiation levels to a fraction of their peak in the 1960s, and more sophisticated test equipment was available, which could compensate for any lingering radiation in newly forged steel. Hitler's U-boats lost their luster, and so they remain in their watery graves, metal monoliths marking the time before the atomic bomb. It was a simple solution for battling fog at RAF airfields during World War II, and one that pilots badly needed for landing. FIDO, or Fog Investigation and Dispersal Operation, started with fuel being sent through a pump system. Fuel was stored in brick-encased tanks, not far from the pump house. There, workers prepared to employ FIDO by opening up valves to allow a flammable liquid through the airfield's pipe system. Sometimes this amounted to 500,000 gallons of fuel, which was how much the tanks held when they were full. The main valves were the gateway between the tanks and the sprawling pipe system. After fuel was sent through lines at either side of the runway, openings along the pipes provided the perfect spots at which to ignite the liquid. Another set of valves were turned to open up the burners, which were manually ignited by a fiery rod attached to the back of a speeding jeep. Up to 300 feet of piping was laid down at FIDO-equipped airfields, and this went a long way in giving guidance to pilots who were returning after night missions. Until then, some had to eject when they couldn't see the runway, leaving their aircrafts to crash land in water. IRBs were used when burners couldn't be placed, and this extended the length and overall size of the runway. It didn't look like much when it wasn't in use, but when the pipeline system was set on fire, it was quite an impressive sight. The smoke and heat that rose from the flames created large holes in the fog, the same way a car's heater would clear up a misty windshield. FIDO was also used during snowfalls, as it could obviously melt snowflakes and prevent icy runways. Even if nothing else was visible, pilots easily made out the massive, fiery rectangles in which they were supposed to land. During testing, no one could even see the trial plane in the sky until it was just 150 feet over the runway. FIDO not only made blind landings possible, but also very easy. But it wasn't cheap. The system could burn over 10,000 gallons of fuel in less than 10 minutes, and each landing cost hundreds of dollars. However, the RAF felt that the cost was still less than that of needless aircraft losses. Because it was an asset in the end, more and more airfields became equipped with FIDO, and the innovation served as one of Britain's secret weapons in World War II. June 2nd, 1957. The countdown is on for a world first, placing a man in an unknown, potentially deadly environment. Suited up and ready to go, Captain Joe Kittinger is stepping through a door and into the history books. This is Project Manhigh. While tests of every nature had been conducted in aircraft and rocket-powered vehicles, the Aeromed Lab was searching for answers to questions beyond that. How would the human body fare at the very top of the Earth's atmosphere? Dr. John Paul Stapp, whose own journey in rocket-powered sleds had given the world data on how many G-forces the human body could withstand at high speeds, had now greenlit a new set of tests. To bring a test subject high into the stratosphere by balloon, to test the effects of cosmic rays on the human body. The Manhigh capsule that would carry the pilot was developed by Winsen Research Incorporated of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and was just large enough to fit its occupant and the equipment needed for the test. After 6 unmanned flights of the Manhigh capsule, and claustrophobia tests on the ground that involved keeping the pilots in the capsule for 24 hours, it was time to conduct the real test. At 6:23 a.m., the balloon was launched, Lifting off from Fleming Field in South St. Paul, Minnesota, Kittinger began the slow ascent into the heavens. Over the course of the next 90 minutes, the Manhigh would rise and see a spectacular view of the Earth's natural beauty and mankind's architectural signature along the way. However, all was not good inside the capsule itself. A mechanical problem caused Kittinger's voice communication equipment to fail. This made it difficult to communicate with the ground crew that there were problems. The capsule's internal pressure was slow to respond to the altitude changes, and Kittinger's supply of liquid oxygen was depleting much more quickly than expected. Communicating by Morse code with his ground crew, the information was relayed to the mission commanders. Just before 9 a.m., the decision was made to begin the descent back to Earth. Before that call was made, Captain Joe Kittinger would hit a record, taking the balloon up to an altitude of 95,200 feet, higher than anyone else in history. When he received the order to return to Earth, he sent back the message, "Come up and get me." The Manhigh began a slow descent that brought it down over a wooded area just before 1 p.m. At the landing site, helicopter crews rushed to free Kittinger from the Manhigh capsule. Joe Kittinger now held the record for the highest sustained altitude achieved by man.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.